The ANC's Integrity Commission says that it has received a letter from the Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, indicating that he will appear before the Commission about the irregular 150 million rand digital vibes tender. On Friday, Dr. Mkhize failed to appear before Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Health after receiving legal advice. Now let's discuss this further. We're now joined via Zoom by political analyst Sanusha Naidu. Sanusha, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so very much for being with us here on SABC News as always.
Good afternoon, Flo. Yes, it's always a pleasure to be on the show with you and your colleagues.
You're most welcome. Let's start here. I mean, it does seem as though the president is in a bit of a tight spot or a difficult spot. There are those, of course, calling for the president to discipline the health minister. But I also seem to remember the president himself saying that he can't or won't maybe discipline ministers. And if I remember correctly, that was in reference to Minister Pravin Gordhan. I can't remember what the backstory was at the time, but this is a statement that the president made, and now he's in a position where he kind of is forced in a way to do something.
Yeah, it's not a good sign for him, both from a public relations perspective, from a brand image, but also I think in the way that he has come out with regard to the whole tackle around corruption. The idea that this new dawn that defined his presidency is going to be about how I tackle corruption. Now, this situation with the health minister represents a litmus test for the president, particularly because the president firstly appoints ministers in his cabinet based on his prerogative. That's what he said when he was addressing, when you look at it, that's what it is. Secondly, it tests the consistency and uniformity in how the minister, how the president actually creates a linkage of action. In other words, here's a minister where the evidence that is being unfolded by the investigative units, and particularly that you've seen even the fact that the SIU report is saying that there is irregularity. Even the Ngobani report is saying that there's something untoward there. I think there's a serious dilemma for the president because it tests the limits at how much can he protect his cabinet. But when he goes into the party, there's a different dynamic. And these are individuals that are basically swinging between the party and the state. And so to a large extent, it is the big litmus test. He's caught between a rock and a hard place. That is the party and the state. But here there are two different dimensions. In the party, he has to feel these different dynamics. He has to essentially look at these dynamics and say, right, how do I play my cards in this party? Now, he's kind of got a leverage in the party. But when it comes to being the president of the republic, he actually appoints at his prerogative. Now, the question is, what are the other dynamics that are at play in the state that he needs to consider, because he's taking a very measured approach. I think this situation asks him to be much more have much more critical reflection of how will this hurt his presidency going forward.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, in terms of what other measures that the president can use. And one opinion that I saw was that perhaps he can reshuffle so that it doesn't look personal. In fact, I saw a joke that, the former president, Jacob Zuma, would have reshuffled by now. Is that an option that the president is looking at? I mean, obviously, these are all just kind of the Twitter conversations and people kind of having, their own ideas of what the president could or would do. But is this a viable option for the president as you're discussing those other measures that you referred to?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a few issues here that need to basically contextualize the reshuffle. Obviously, there's one position that has to be filled, and that's the minister in the presidency. And that is something that's certain. If he has to basically ask the health minister to step aside or to go on special leave, it's not a reshuffle. It is actually filling a position in a temporary capacity, and that means you either have the deputy health minister step in, or there could be other move a particular minister from, say, a particular ministry into the health ministry. So it's not a reshuffle per se, or in the kind of technical definition of the term. The third issue is here, if he goes with this idea of a reshuffle, he has to be very strategic in when he needs to do his reshuffle and how he needs to do his reshuffle. I think what the real crisis of conscience for the president is here is that you have a health minister who invariably wasn't a bad minister. He was on the ground. He was visible. He was the guy. He came across as the nice guy, and he was very hands-on. So again, I think for me personally, it was a bit of a shock to say, is this real? And what's happening here? Because it tells you that the deep reaches of state capture and of course corruption, and particularly under the PPE tenders, has been so unconscionable in how it has unfolded. Now we hear today that there are 3 or 4 officials, and I don't know how far it's true, but it was a media report that still needs to be verified, that have been given suspension letters in the Ministry of Health. Now, and it's some senior individuals as well. I think up to the article says DDG level as well, and spokesperson, but we don't know if that has happened. We have to verify this information. So it's still at this point, something that needs to be maybe from the health ministry side to basically come out and say, is this the situation in what's currently happening? But I think that's the dilemma for the president, is how do you do this reshuffle? If a reshuffle is what you want to do, who are you going to basically move into that position of health? There's a whole lot of other issues that underpin that whole ministry as well. You've got to make sure that the person that comes in, they know what's going on within the ministry. They work well with the various individuals in the ministry, with the deputy minister, all of these things. And we kind of hope that even if you have this situation with what we're seeing now in the health ministry, how would it affect the rollout plan and the objectives mandate of the ministry in going forward in this pandemic? So there's a number of issues that he probably has to consider, in addition to the fact that this is one of his senior members in cabinet that is caught in this very, very unfortunate situation.
And Sanusha, I just want to touch on that point that you touched on, interestingly, and I think you speak for a lot of people that were quite shocked by this. A lot of people, certainly I did too, see him as, the nice guy. Our health minister is always kind of communicating with us as to what's happening, especially at this time of the pandemic. And based on that perception that we all kind of, most of us had of the minister, I mean, do you think that he would then put the president in a position where he has to do something, where the president has to pull the trigger? And I say that because there's been discussion around whether or not the minister would in fact just sort of fall on his sword if more evidence came up. Obviously now, it's going to be put through the Integrity Commission and so forth, but one wonders if perhaps that's the route that he will take. Obviously we'll see more and more as the Integrity Commission does give more information. But I wonder, would he want to put the president in that position where he must just pull the trigger?
I don't know. At this point in time, when you look at the sequencing of events and the sequencing of the responses with regard to this whole situation on the Digital Vibes contract, you get the sense that it wasn't handled well. I think not appearing before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Friday was in a way falling on the health minister falling on his sword, or part of his sword. And in a way, you avail yourself to the Integrity Commission. So again, the question is, where is your accountability to the state and to state structures and to Parliament as an oversight body over the executive versus the Integrity Commission of the ANC? That alone, the optics on that gives you a very interesting picture, Flo, particularly the fact that where do you see your accountability in terms of this whole situation? And I think that in itself tells you, if you don't want to go to the Portfolio Committee and you cite the sub judice rule, then you are willing to avail yourself to the Integrity Commission. And I think that's the other dilemma for the president as well, is that the optics of this doesn't bode well for him. It's the optics of the fact that the president has to now deal with all of these leakages that just can't be contained around this whole saga of the Digital Vibes contract. And more importantly, if indeed you see the party more important than the state, then it hits home all of those things that the president said they're going to address when he appeared before the Zondo Commission.
All right, Sanusha, as always, brilliant analysis. We appreciate it so much. Thank you. All right, that is political analyst Sanusha Naidu speaking to us there, of course, at the time that the health minister finds himself in a pretty difficult situation at this time. We'll certainly be keeping you updated with what the portfolio committee comes up with.